Ladies and gentlemen, marriage is one of the most sacred gifts from God, a covenant built on love, trust, and faithfulness. It is meant to be a source of joy, strength, and spiritual growth. Yet in today's world, this sacred bond is constantly under attack. Subtle temptations, small compromises, and worldly distractions can creep in unnoticed, turning what was once a strong relationship into a fragile one. Many do not even realize they are walking a dangerous path until it is too late. But God has given us wisdom, guidance, and a clear warning. There are sins that, if left unchecked, can destroy a marriage from within. These sins do not always announce themselves loudly. They begin in the heart, in the mind, in the smallest of actions. Some disguise themselves as harmless, others as justified, but all lead to one place: pain, brokenness, and separation from the true purpose of marriage. Today we will uncover these dangers, sins that must be avoided at all costs. This is not just a message of warning, it is a message of hope, because no matter where you stand, no matter what mistakes have been made, God's grace is greater. Healing is possible, restoration is within reach. So, I urge you, listen carefully, reflect deeply, and stay with me until the very end. This is a conversation that could save a marriage, heal a wounded heart, and realign a relationship with God's perfect plan. Let's begin. Marriage is not merely a social arrangement or a legal contract. It is a sacred bond ordained by God. From the very beginning, it was designed to reflect something far greater than human companionship. It mirrors the divine relationship between God and His people. A husband and wife are not just two individuals choosing to live together. They are joined in a covenant, a solemn promise that binds them in love, fidelity, and mutual sacrifice. This bond is not meant to be broken on a whim, nor is it meant to be reduced to mere convenience or personal gratification. It is a lifelong commitment, requiring both individuals to uphold its sanctity with honor and devotion. In today's world, the idea of marriage has been diluted. Many see it as an optional step in life, something to be discarded if it becomes too difficult or unfulfilling. This mindset, however, completely ignores the deeper purpose of marriage. It is not simply about happiness, but about holiness. When two people come together in marriage, they are called to refine one another, to love selflessly, and to serve each other in a way that reflects God's love. It is through the struggles, sacrifices, and shared joys that a marriage becomes a testimony of faith and endurance. At its core, marriage is about unity. It is not just physical unity, but emotional, spiritual, and moral unity. When God brought Adam and Eve together, He declared that the two shall become one flesh, a statement that goes beyond mere physical intimacy. It signifies a merging of lives, desires, and purposes. This unity is fragile when built on human emotions alone, but when rooted in divine principles, it becomes unshakable. God's design for marriage was never about momentary passion or convenience. It was about creating a bond that withstands the trials of life. This sacred bond also demands exclusivity. Just as God calls His people to be faithful to Him, marriage calls for undivided loyalty between husband and wife. Infidelity, whether physical or emotional, breaks not just trust, but the very essence of what marriage represents. Even more subtle threats, like neglect or selfishness, can slowly erode the foundation of this sacred relationship. True love in marriage is not about taking what one desires, but about giving of oneself completely. It is through this giving that love is strengthened rather than diminished. In a world that increasingly devalues commitment, marriage stands as a divine institution that requires perseverance. It is not about fleeting emotions or perfect compatibility, but about the daily choice to honor, respect, and cherish one another. Challenges will come, temptations may arise, but a marriage rooted in faith remains steadfast. God does not simply endorse marriage, He blesses and upholds it when it is lived according to His will. Those who treat it as sacred, who guard it against impurity, and who nurture it with patience and love, will find that their marriage is not just an earthly bond, but a reflection of something eternal. Love and lust are often mistaken for one another, yet they could not be more different in nature. Love is selfless, enduring, and rooted in truth, while lust is selfish, fleeting, and built on illusion. Love seeks the good of the other person, even at the cost of personal sacrifice, whereas lust seeks personal gratification, regardless of the cost to others. When these two are confused, marriages suffer and relationships lose their depth and meaning. The world frequently portrays lust as an expression of love, but in reality it is love's counterfeit, offering momentary pleasure at the expense of lasting fulfillment. True love is a commitment, not just an emotion. It does not waver when difficulties arise, nor does it seek an escape when desires are not immediately satisfied. Love endures through trials, forgives faults, and prioritizes the well-being of the beloved. It finds joy in giving rather than taking, and remains steadfast even when passion fades. Lust, on the other hand, is rooted in self-indulgence. Indulgence, it demands instant satisfaction, disregards consequences, and treats people as objects rather than souls. It is a fire that consumes but does not warm, promising fulfillment but leaving emptiness in its wake. In marriage, the distinction between love and lust becomes crucial. A marriage built on love is one where both spouses seek to serve, honor, and cherish each other. They do not view their partner as a means to personal pleasure, but as a lifelong companion, worthy of respect and devotion. Such a marriage is strengthened by patience, kindness, and faithfulness. Conversely, when lust takes precedence, a marriage becomes fragile. It turns intimacy into a selfish pursuit rather than an act of unity. Instead of deepening the bond between husband and wife, lust erodes trust, fuels dissatisfaction, and breeds infidelity. A person driven by lust is never truly satisfied, always searching for more, yet finding nothing of real value. Lust also distorts the beauty of intimacy. God designed physical intimacy within marriage to be a reflection of love, trust, and mutual commitment. It is meant to unite two souls in a way that is both sacred and joyful. But when lust is allowed to take control, intimacy loses its meaning. It becomes an act of mere physical gratification rather than an expression of unity. This corruption leads to unrealistic expectations, discontentment, and a heart that is constantly seeking fulfillment in all the wrong places. Resisting lust requires discipline, but more importantly, it requires a heart that values love above momentary desire. It demands the recognition that a spouse is not an object of pleasure, but a partner in life's journey. Love calls for sacrifice, for putting the needs of another before personal gratification, for choosing faithfulness over fleeting excitement. Those who truly love will seek purity in their thoughts and actions, knowing that the strength of their marriage depends on it. Love builds, while lust destroys. The choice between them determines not only the health of a marriage, but the condition of the soul. Adultery and infidelity are among the most destructive forces that can enter a marriage. They are not merely betrayals of trust, they are violations of the sacred covenant that binds a husband and wife together. Marriage is built on faithfulness, and when that faithfulness is broken, it creates wounds that are deep and often irreparable. The damage caused by adultery goes beyond the immediate relationship. It affects families, children, and even one's own spiritual and emotional well-being. What may begin as a seemingly harmless attraction or a fleeting moment of temptation can lead to a path of destruction that few anticipate until it is too late. Infidelity is not just about physical betrayal. It begins long before that. It starts in the heart, in the mind, in the seemingly small compromises that make room for temptation. When a person allows their thoughts to linger on someone other than their spouse, when they entertain fantasies, when they seek emotional validation outside their marriage, they have already begun to drift away from their vows. What follows is often a gradual erosion of boundaries, an inappropriate conversation here, a secret message there, until one day the line is crossed, and what once seemed unthinkable becomes reality. One of the greatest lies that people tell themselves is that infidelity is justified under certain circumstances. They believe that if they are unhappy in their marriage, if they feel neglected or unappreciated, they have the right to seek comfort elsewhere. But marriage is not based on momentary feelings. It is a covenant made before God. It is meant to be upheld even in difficult seasons. Infidelity is never a solution. It is an escape that leads only to more pain. It does not fix problems, it multiplies them, leaving behind regret, shame, and brokenness. The consequences of adultery are far-reaching. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. The betrayed spouse often experiences deep emotional trauma, struggling with feelings of worthlessness and betrayal. Children, if involved, suffer in ways that many do not realize, seeing their family structure crumble, losing their sense of security, and sometimes even blaming themselves for what has happened. Spiritually, adultery creates a rift between the individual and God. Sin thrives in secrecy, and infidelity is often accompanied by lies, deception, and a hardened heart. It takes a person further from the path of righteousness and closer to self-destruction. Avoiding adultery requires vigilance. It means guarding one's heart and mind, refusing to entertain even the smallest temptations. It means setting firm boundaries in interactions with others, being transparent with one's spouse, and continually nurturing the marriage relationship. Love is not just about emotions. It is about choices. Choosing to remain faithful even when things are difficult, choosing to honor vows even when tempted otherwise, choosing to seek God's help in moments of weakness. These are the actions that preserve a marriage. Faithfulness is not just about avoiding sin. It is about actively loving, cherishing, and protecting the bond that was meant to last a lifetime. Pornography and impurity are among the most insidious threats to marriage, largely because they often go unnoticed until the damage is severe. Unlike adultery, which is an outward betrayal, these sins begin in secret, taking root in the mind and heart before manifesting in destructive ways. Many justify their indulgence in pornography or impure thoughts by believing it is harmless, something private that does not affect their marriage. This is a dangerous deception. What seems like a personal habit eventually transforms into a force that distorts reality, erodes intimacy, and weakens the foundation of trust between husband and wife. The greatest danger of pornography is the way it reshapes desires. It creates unrealistic expectations about intimacy, portraying a version of relationships that is artificial and disconnected from real love. In marriage, true intimacy is about connection, vulnerability, and mutual affection. Pornography, however, reduces it to something mechanical, self-serving, and devoid of emotional depth. A person who consumes it regularly becomes conditioned to seek pleasure in a way that is detached from their spouse, leading to dissatisfaction, disinterest, and even resentment in the marital relationship. Over time, what was once a fulfilling and meaningful bond can feel inadequate simply because the mind has been trained to desire something unreal. Impurity is not just about external actions. It is about the state of the heart. Jesus made it clear that even looking at another person with lust is equivalent to committing adultery in the heart. This means that sin begins long before any physical act takes place. When a person allows impure thoughts to linger, when they entertain fantasies outside of their marriage, they are already walking a dangerous path. The mind, once filled with impurity, becomes restless and dissatisfied, constantly seeking new stimulation. This is why many who start with pornography or unchecked lustful thoughts eventually find themselves drawn to greater sins, sometimes even to the point of infidelity. Beyond damaging relationships, impurity also weakens one's spiritual life. A person cannot indulge in sin and expect to maintain closeness with God. The more one engages in impurity, the more their conscience becomes dulled, making it easier to justify other wrongs. Prayer becomes difficult, guilt takes hold, and eventually a sense of spiritual emptiness sets in. This is why those who struggle with impurity often feel distant from both their spouse and God. It is not just a private sin, but a spiritual sickness that affects every area of life. The path to purity requires discipline and commitment. It means actively guarding one's eyes, thoughts, and heart. It involves setting boundaries with media consumption, avoiding situations that may lead to temptation, and seeking accountability when necessary. Most importantly, it requires an intentional effort to strengthen the marital bond, prioritizing real intimacy over counterfeit pleasure. A marriage where both spouses are committed to purity is one that flourishes. It is built on trust, mutual respect, and love that is not tainted by deception. Those who reject impurity and pursue holiness will find not only a stronger marriage, but also a deeper relationship with God. Emotional affairs are one of the most overlooked yet destructive forces in a marriage. Unlike physical infidelity, which is clear and undeniable, emotional unfaithfulness often creeps in subtly, disguised as harmless friendship or innocent conversation. It begins with a connection, someone who listens, understands, and provides comfort in ways that, over time, start to feel more fulfilling than the marital relationship. At first, it may seem like nothing more than a friendship, but as the emotional bond deepens, it slowly erodes the commitment and intimacy that should be reserved for one's spouse. What makes emotional affairs so dangerous is that they deceive the heart. A person may not recognize that they are being unfaithful because there is no physical betrayal. Yet the bond formed with another person outside the marriage can be just as intense, sometimes even more so. Emotional unfaithfulness diverts affection, attention, and emotional energy away from the spouse, creating distance in the marriage. The person involved may start to compare their spouse to the one they confide in, seeing faults in their marriage that once seemed insignificant. They may feel excitement, longing, or even jealousy in ways that reveal a deeper attachment than they intended. Unlike a physical affair, which often requires secrecy, an emotional affair can be justified as friendship, making it even harder to recognize and resist. The conversations may start as innocent discussions about work, interests, or personal struggles, but over time they become more intimate. Sharing emotions, fears, and dreams with someone other than one's spouse creates a bond that should exist only within marriage. A spouse may not realize how much they have drifted until they find themselves thinking about the other person constantly, confiding in them more than their partner, or feeling guilty but unable to pull away. The consequences of an emotional affair are just as painful as a physical one. The betrayed spouse often feels an overwhelming sense of rejection, realizing that their partner has formed a deep connection with someone else. Trust is broken, even if no physical boundary was crossed. Because emotional intimacy is just as sacred as physical intimacy. In many cases, emotional affairs eventually lead to physical unfaithfulness, as the bond grows stronger and the temptation to take the next step becomes harder to resist. Even if it does not turn into a physical affair, the damage done to the marriage is significant, creating a gap that is difficult to repair. Guarding against emotional unfaithfulness requires vigilance and honesty. It means being aware of how much emotional energy is being invested in someone outside the marriage and recognizing when a relationship is becoming too close. Spouses must prioritize open communication, ensuring that their deepest thoughts and feelings are shared with each other rather than with an outsider. Setting boundaries in friendships, avoiding excessive one-on-one time with the opposite sex, and remaining accountable in interactions are essential. A strong marriage is built on emotional exclusivity, where love, trust, and connection are reserved for the person to whom one has pledged lifelong commitment. Neglect in marriage is one of the most silent yet devastating sins that can weaken the sacred bond between husband and wife. Unlike other forms of unfaithfulness, which may involve a clear act of betrayal, neglect often works slowly, chipping away at love and commitment over time. It begins with small things, forgetting to express appreciation, failing to listen with genuine interest, or prioritizing work, hobbies, or friendships over the marriage. At first, these seem like minor oversights, but if left unchecked, they can grow into a deep emotional divide that leaves both spouses feeling isolated and unloved. Marriage is not something that flourishes on its own. It requires continuous effort, just like any valuable relationship. Many couples enter into marriage with excitement, promising to love and cherish each other forever. But as time passes, daily responsibilities take over, and the intentionality that once defined their relationship begins to fade. Conversations become routine, affection becomes rare, and meaningful time together is replaced by distractions. The problem with neglect is that it does not feel like a deliberate sin. It often happens unintentionally. A spouse may not mean to ignore their partner's needs, but the result is the same: loneliness, frustration, and an increasing sense of disconnection. One of the most harmful aspects of neglect is that it opens the door to other temptations. When a spouse feels unappreciated or unheard, they become more vulnerable to seeking comfort elsewhere. This is how many emotional and physical affairs begin, not with a conscious decision to be unfaithful, but with a longing to feel valued, understood, and cared for. The moment a person starts feeling that someone else listens better, appreciates them more, or makes them feel special in a way their spouse no longer does, the foundation of the marriage is already at risk. Neglect may not be as obvious as adultery, but its consequences can be just as destructive. Another effect of neglect is that it weakens the spiritual foundation of the marriage. A strong, God-centered relationship requires time spent together in prayer, shared values, and a commitment to growing spiritually as a couple. When spouses stop prioritizing each other, they often stop seeking God together as well. They may still attend church or perform religious duties, but without unity, their marriage lacks the depth and strength it was meant to have. A neglected marriage is more susceptible to conflict, bitterness, and emotional distance, making it harder to reflect the love that God intended for it. Preventing neglect requires daily effort and awareness. It means choosing to be present, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. Simple acts, such as listening without distraction, expressing gratitude, spending quality time together, and reaffirming love, can rebuild and strengthen the bond between husband and wife. Marriage is not just about staying together, it is about growing together. The best way to protect a marriage from neglect is to